Hey, Quentin, remember June? Yeah, me neither. Anyway, at some point I wrote a script because I did watch movies in that month, so let's go through them.
Gaming cookie guy.
Entertainment.
On the 1st of June, which feels like a lifetime ago, I went to see Toy Story in concert where they, took the score of the movie and it was played by a live symphony orchestra, and it was unsurprisingly exceptional. I hadn't actually watched Toy Story start to finish in quite some time. I just hadn't sat down to watch it. And so, for some reason in my head, I had built up this narrative that it was overrated. But I was still down to see it. The movie starts, and I'm focused on the orchestra. I'm there to watch the orchestra while the movie is playing in the background. And for large stretches of the movie, I forgot that there was a live orchestra playing because I was so enraptured in this movie. I was just enjoying the film. I don't have to preach to you about the praises of Toy Story. It is endlessly quotable. It is truly a landmark film, and it does, to my surprise and to my joy, still hold up. I believe this is a touring event, so if it comes anywhere near you, I wholeheartedly recommend going to see this. And no, they didn't replace Randy Newman. It's still Randy Newman singing, so don't worry about that. You get... My Randy Newman sounds like Peter Griffin. You get... I give Toy Story Live, directed by John Lasseter, orchestra conducted by Jason Sieber, a 10 out of 10, making this a very unique addition to this year's 10 out of 10 club. The very next day, June 2nd, two big days I had marked on my calendar for months, I went to opening night of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. There's something oddly fitting about watching this immediately after watching Toy Story. Just, you see the genesis, the birth of the full-length CG animated film, and then see how far we've come 30 years later with this groundbreaking movie. So Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is one of, if not my absolute favorite movie of all time. So this movie was always going to be under heavy scrutiny by me, and I'm glad to say they came at least close to replicating the magic that Lord and Miller brought into this world about 5 years ago. And so, yes, I am just one very late voice adding to the chorus of praise for this movie. Although, if you haven't checked it out, please check out my Spider-Man Escape the Spider-Verse rewrite pitch here on this channel. I do give Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, directed by Joaquim Dos Santos, Justin K. Thompson, and Kent Powers, a 9 out of 10. And I'd probably give the soundtrack that too. Metro! On June 5th, I watched the latest movie to come out of the brand name cinematic universe, Blackberry. I actually go more in depth into this movie in the video where I talk about the best and worst movies to come out this year. So I don't really want to parrot everything I said there. I will just say, probably just go watch that video. And no, I wasn't a huge fan of this. I found it to be pretty bland, pretty lacking in every department, other than maybe the acting, even though I thought the characters were a bit much.
I'm from Waterloo, where the vampires hang out.
I don't know. There's definitely a chance this is one where I completely missed the mark. I could be looking back and shaking my head at how I didn't love this, even though I maybe love it now, kind of like a white noise situation. I don't know. For now, I give Blackberry, directed by Matt Johnson, a 2 out of 10. On June 7th, I was in the mood for some soft pretzel sticks, and the best place to get them is at one of my local theaters. So I figured, what the heck, let's go see Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. I truly believe that if this movie had released when I was like 12 and not 25, it would have been one of my favorite movies to have ever been released. But at this point, I just think it's a little too late for me and this franchise. I thought this movie was overall generic despite a pretty good cast. It was saved in large part thanks to a kind of standout last action scene. I think it was really great. I think that action scene may have held a glimmer of hope for this franchise still, but we haven't gotten there yet. I may have jumped ship on this franchise years ago, but this movie at least had me taking one last look at the boat, wondering if it's too late to get back on. I give Transformers Rise of the Beasts, directed by Stephen Caple Jr., a 3 out of 10. 10 out of 10 trailer, though.
Let them come.
On June 10th, I started dieting. Don't worry, this was written in the past. I've broken that a million times since then. But, at the time of writing, I was dieting, and I watched a movie about food. So, it spelled disaster. I watched Flamin' Hot. This and Blackberry are probably interesting case studies because Flamin' Hot is an example of a movie based around a brand that I actually liked. And I'm pretty sure that like 90 to 99% of this movie is completely fabricated. I don't for a second believe that a lot of the events as presented in this movie actually happened. And yet I don't care because the lies you told me, the story you spun, was a pretty enjoyable story. You can lie to me all day. Just make it a good lie. And this movie is a great lie. And I feel bad because maybe Blackberry was telling the truth the whole time and I don't care. Maybe if they just lied to me more, I would have liked it. Jesse Garcia, more than anyone, is a real standout for this movie. Puts in one of my favorite performances of the year. Just made it so I loved rooting for this guy. If I had to describe this movie in a sentence, I would say it's like Luis from Ant-Man was allowed to make a movie, and I am all for that. This is on Disney Plus, Hulu. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a quick watch. It's an easy watch. It's a likable watch. I recommend it. So I give Flamin' Hot, directed by Eva Longoria, a 6 out of 10. On June 16th, I watched a movie that gave me the single biggest laugh I have gotten in a movie theater to that point, possibly ever. I don't know if I've ever, in public, just full belly laughed during a movie. That movie, believe it or not, was The Flash. I fully understand hating this movie. There are so many reasons to not like this movie, and they're just lobbed up to you. They are served up to you on a silver platter. So if you don't like this movie, I understand. But that was not my experience. I don't know why I feel guilty when I say this, but I watched this movie and I had a good time. Oh, and the scene that I just absolutely cackled during, full spoilers. I don't care about this movie. Spoiling it for you. It's when a baby crashed through a skyscraper window and started plummeting. That was the funniest thing I've ever seen, and everything to follow just added to that insanity, just pure incredulous laughter, ecstatic joy. It was mental, and I loved it. Now, backing up, reel it in just a little bit. Is this movie good? No. I'm probably laughing at this movie just as much, if not more so, than I'm laughing with this movie. This movie has a tremendous opportunity cost that I have to acknowledge because I am a big spokesperson for if you can't make the best movie, why make it at all? Opportunity cost. You really only get one or maybe two chances to make this type of story, so do it right. And they did miss that mark. This is possibly the last time we'll get to see Ben Affleck, Michael Keaton, these iconic portrayals, for better or worse, of Batman, and this is what they do with it. It's the now, unfortunately, definitive rendition of the Flashpoint story for millions of people, or million of people. I don't know how many people actually went to go see this. And that's unfortunate because it's a beloved comic book storyline, and this is what they're going to think of now. So yeah, the hate is justified even if you don't take into account the extracurriculars of one Ezra Miller. It gets a resounding meh and a couple belly laughs from me, and I give The Flash, directed by Andy Muschietti, a 5 out of 10. On June 16th, I finally finished watching all of this year's Best Picture nominees that came out last year when I watched Tar. Not breaking any new ground here. Tar is great. I think this movie very intentionally inspires discussion. Sometimes those discussions can be a little too heated and divisive, but at their best, I've seen some really interesting and thought-provoking stuff come out of this movie in comment sections online. It's very much a product of our time, so I'm curious, fast forwarding, how we'll look back on this once the dust settles on our current social climate. In the end, Tar is a great biopic of a fictional person, but it brings that fictional person to life before our eyes, where most movies based on real people feel flat, give us a slanted view of their life. This gives us Lydia Tar and leaves all the judgment to her upon the audience. And between you and me, I love Michelle Yeoh, but I don't know how she wins Best Actress over
Cate Blanchett. Tar.
I give Tar, directed by Todd Field, an 8 out of 10. On June 17th, I returned to the theater to watch Disney Pixar's Elemental, and where once I had soft pretzels, that day I had hummus. And not very good hummus. Despite that, I still enjoyed the movie a good bit. So that tells you what you need to know about the movie right there. You can have bad hummus and still like this movie. I don't think Elemental will become anyone, or at least not a lot of people's favorite Pixar movie of all time. I think it's a story that other movies have done to better, greater effect, but it's still done very well. What I love about this movie is it treats its relationships between characters with so much care. One of my least favorite character tropes in any kind of relationship movie is the characters breaking up. And sometimes it's warranted, but usually, most of the times in these cliche movies, it's some superficial misunderstanding and the audience is just cringing and wanting them to get back together. Maybe that's intentional, but it's nonetheless annoying. But in Elemental, we don't run into that. We understand every decision our characters make because we understand their motivations for making them. And in the end, in typical Pixar fashion, I was teary-eyed, even if most of the other people who watched it didn't get the same thing out of it, and that's fine. I give Elemental, directed by Peter Sohn, a 7 out of 10. And side note, please tell me I'm not the only one who would have swore up and down that Ember was voiced by Emma Stone. They sound identical. Even now, I cannot tell the difference. It was only when the credits were rolling that I was like, no, the credits are actually wrong. It was Emma Stone who played this character. On June 18th, I got a Peacock subscription just to watch a movie that I had missed during its theatrical run, it being Polite Society. I had seen while it was in theaters. Granted, it was in theaters very, very briefly. Like, if you blinked, you would have missed it. It was getting some great reviews. Unfortunately, I will not be one of them. I really wanted to like this, but it kind of over-promised and under-delivered for me. This movie promised creative action, snappy writing, creative editing, beautiful costume design, and it did all those things, just not to the degree that I was expecting or wanting. It's like they had all the ingredients for a perfect movie. They were mixing them all together, and then they dialed it down from like a 9 to like a 6. Except the costumes. Those stayed at a 10. And so I do recommend Polite Society. It just go in with maybe a little bit of watered down expectations. It's still a very fun watch, especially like, look at me. I'm not the target demographic. I'm sure if you are, you would absolutely love this. So I give Polite Society, directed by Nida Manzoor, a 4 out of 10. On June 21st, I got to check out the new Netflix action movie Extraction 2. Not so new anymore, whatever. So the first Extraction movie was one of my favorites of 2020, the year it released. Now, it had the benefit of a really depleted competition that year, but I don't want to discount that from it. I don't want to take it away from it being one of my favorites of the year, of the whole year. This one so badly wants to recapture that, wants to follow the same format, and it kind of does to the movie's own detriment, though. So a lot of movies have a difference in their first and second halves. They have that midpoint that usually changes something for our hero. This movie has a very, very striking difference in its first and second halves. The first half of Extraction 2 is everything I wanted out of the first one and more. It is so good, creative. They left it all out there on camera. It's really fantastic stuff. The problem is that it's too good. It's so fantastic that by the second half, it's like they had nothing left in the tank. Now, the second half, by its own right, is a really great action movie. It just can't compete with itself. It just ramps down too much by then. Regardless, if they could nail this formula for the third one, it will be awesome. And even this movie is still a really great action flick. I give Extraction 2, directed by Sam Hargrave, a 6 out of 10. but I'd give the first half like 9. On June 2nd, I literally forgot that I watched this movie. On June 2nd, I watched a couple of movies, starting with Frank Oz's Little Shop of Horrors. I watched this because it seemed like one of those touchstones of nerd history that I just never got around to seeing, or I'd never understand the references to, except that it's so saturated in pop culture. So I finally decided, for academic reasons, to check this out. Unfortunately, for a lot of the reasons that kept me away from this movie for so long, I didn't end up liking it. But I kind of knew that going in. I had heard some of the music. I had seen clips. It was never really my thing. And yes, I knew that going in. So I'm not going to like dog on the movie too much because a lot of people love this and it just wasn't for me. I admire this movie. I admire the artistry in the comedic writing. I admire the performances. I especially admire the puppetry. This is second to none, truly. So I'm glad I finally checked this out. I'm glad I finally saw it for myself. Unfortunately, I do give Little Shop of Horrors, directed by Frank Oz, a 4 out of 10. Now, still on that same night, I did a back-to-back theatrical run, which is rare for me. No, I didn't. I want to be clear. I didn't walk into one movie, walk out of it, and walk into another. I bought 2 tickets. I bought 2 tickets to see both of these movies. First of which, the raunchy sex comedy, No Hard Feelings. This movie promised a return to, I would say, like the Apatow style of comedies, and it didn't, at least not to me, and the relatively dead crowd despite it selling out. I want to say first and foremost, I didn't like Jennifer Lawrence in this, like at all. And it doesn't help that her character is just straight up a predator and like a bad person. Like, I get it's a comedy, you're supposed to laugh a lot of this off, but that's difficult to look past. Oddly enough, where I thought this movie kind of worked was with its male lead, portrayed by Andrew Barth Feldman. He brought like a strange genuineness to this character that made him like almost too likable as a foil to Jennifer Lawrence's character. Yeah, I don't spend a ton of time watching comedy movies. I know that sounds pretentious, but it's true because I usually don't end up liking them, and you can add this to the pile. I give No Hard Feelings, directed by Gene Stupnitsky, a 3 out of 10. And finally, we get to the movie that I was actually at the theater to see that night. I had like a 7:30 showtime for this, and I was like, oh, I need to kill a couple hours. Let's go see No Hard Feelings. This is what I was actually at the movie theater watch. It was Wes Anderson's Asteroid City. The sentence I'm about to say is not going to make any sense if you haven't watched any Wes Anderson movies. But as he makes movies, he only makes more Wes Anderson-y movies. I don't know. That sentence probably didn't make sense even if you have seen his films. But so naturally, this is the most Wes Anderson movie that has ever been released. And that is a good and a bad thing. It's good because this movie is meticulously crafted to his vision. Every frame to every line read from every one of the A-listers in his stable of cast members delivers this exactly as Wes envisioned it. Now, it is a bad thing because it feels like in order to achieve that vision, he has sucked some of the life out of Asteroid City. The whole movie, I'm watching some very cool things and hearing some very fun and good lines, but I'm feeling absolutely none of it. And I was fine. I was completely fine with that in a movie like French Dispatch, which I liked quite a bit. Because it follows the anthology format, you don't have time to get to know these characters. You do kind of just have to enjoy the stories as they're presented to you and then move on to the next thing. I think it works for that format. But in Asteroid City, I'm constantly held at arm's length away from these characters that I want to get to know a little bit better. And so while I still love Wes Anderson, I will still be at opening night to every one of his movies. This one will go into the record books as one of my least favorites, which, one of them had to be. Still, I give Asteroid City, directed by Wes Anderson, a 5 out of 10.
Oh.
On June 24th, our schedules finally lined up after like a month of trying to see this movie. I got to watch The Little Mermaid with my sister and my niece. Oh man, she was barely able to pay attention for like 20 minutes. You tried. If nothing else, this movie served to remind me just how good the story and the music of The Little Mermaid is, no matter what version of the movie you watch. My niece was watching everything but the screen at times, but anytime a song picked up, she was laser focused in. The new songs were fine, mostly forgettable, except for Scuttlebutt, which I will never forget, for better or worse.
When I was like, whap, chicka, whap, whap, chicka, whap.
I remember.
And the original songs are just as good, if not better. Dare I say it? I've had Daveed Diggs' version of "Kiss the Girl" stuck in my head on repeat since watching this. And Halle Bailey, I do not envy the road it took her to get here, but she was great. I cannot imagine anybody else delivering like she did on this role, except for maybe some shaky moments when she gets her legs and is mute. Some of that wasn't perfect in my opinion, but other than that, all the singing, all the underwater stuff was all fantastic. And if this is going to be the definitive version of The Little Mermaid for this generation, I think you could do a lot worse. There's nothing wrong with that. I give The Little Mermaid, directed by Rob Marshall, a 6 out of 10. On June 27th, I finally had the excuse I needed to watch an all-time classic, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This movie is a joy to watch. Centering this movie around Indy's relationship with his father, such a smart move because the play between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery is so good. They play off each other really, really well. It's a great time whenever they're on screen together, which is thankfully a lot of the movie. And the stunts, always great. They are the highlight of the Indiana Jones franchise, and they are no better than they are in Last Crusade. They even kept the tradition of if Indiana Jones isn't in this movie, nothing changes. Thumbs up to that. And so I give Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, directed by Steven Spielberg, an 8 out of 10. Finally, this brings me to the last thing I watched in June. On June 27th, I rewatched Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel. Out of all of his movies that I hadn't just seen recently, this is one that I remembered the least about watching, and I can see why after rewatching this. This really is, after talking about Asteroid City, this is where he started to diverge for me personally. Those cracks start to form. This is where he really diverges into his grand vision. He fully leaves our world and enters his own. Much like Asteroid City, this is a very cool movie, but it is not one that I connected with, but on a surface level. Though there are so many clips of Ralph Fiennes from this that are truly fantastic. He is so surprisingly funny in this role, and therefore great.
She's been murdered, and you think I did it.
Hey!
Well, Quentin, I hope this video was worth the wait. Sorry. I'll try not to let a full calendar month pass before doing the next one, but who knows? Times are crazy. This is typically where I would talk about what's coming up in July, but July's already come and gone. So instead, I'll just say stay tuned for the next video where you can see my thoughts on everything that released in the last month, which was quite a lot. So check that out once you see it on the channel. I will see you then.